Welcome, students. We're going to be talking about impromptu speaking, a competition in which you will be competing in, and also a very important skill set to start off your journey in debate. And just in a journey as far as being able to organize your thoughts effectively and efficiently. Impromptu speaking is a great way to get that done. The first question I have is, what makes a speech versus like a casual conversation? You know, what's the difference between giving a speech and standing with your friends in the concourse and just talking? So I'm going to give you a couple seconds. The difference that stuck out in my mind is planning. Speeches are planned. There's also usually a purpose, an intent behind why they're giving a speech. Maybe it's a speech over health codes. Maybe it's a speech about history. Maybe it's a speech trying to rally everyone and get them to all support a certain piece of legislation. There's a reason for the speech. And planning takes place over days. It can be over actually hours, days, weeks. Sometimes speakers have been studying their whole life on their content area, and so they're speaking and they're planning their speech based upon years of research. Actually, famously, one of Martin Luther King's most famous speeches in his early years, leading the civil rights movement, he actually took about 10 minutes to plan it, and it became a speech that put him on the map. And what's cool about that example is that for impromptu speaking, we don't give you years to plan your speech. We don't give you days. We actually give you 4 minutes. Okay, so if Martin Luther King can do it and plan an effective speech in 10 minutes, and by golly, Jackson students can effectively plan a speech in 4 minutes, all right? And you can do this. And at the competition, you'll get 4 minutes to plan and 5 minutes to speak, okay? And the other thing to remember at competition is that you will be given 3 to 5 topics in an envelope, and your time does not start for planning until you have officially chosen one of those topics. And you might be saying to yourself, what? Like, this is pretty intense. You only give me 4 minutes and then you expect me to speak for 5 minutes? And yes, I do, and yes, you can. You can do this, okay, with the right tools, right? And that's what we're here at school. That's why, you're studying debate, is because you're going to gain the tools and you're going to be able to use the tools you need to use to be successful, to organize your thoughts effectively, efficiently. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the outline of an impromptu speech, because it does have some very specific parts. And at the competition, they're going to be looking for those individual parts of your speech and seeing how well you sort of manipulate them. The first part is the opening, also called the introduction. And remember, anything that's underlined, I want you to write down. So the first 30 seconds of your speech are probably the most important. Okay, remember, first impressions are huge as far as how they can impact a person's judgment for the rest of their time, right? And so for the first 30 seconds of the speech, you must grab the audience's attention and engage their interest. Okay, and that's where all those things that you learned in English language arts and writing classes, you've got to have quotes, and you've got to have stories and interesting facts, and maybe a personal story or an anecdote. But remember, it has to be relevant. Beware of tangents, right? So if you're gonna make an introduction on and it's gonna be about Monday Night Football, but you're gonna eventually be talking about your mom's meatloaf, then your mom's meatloaf better taste like a football. Otherwise, why are you talking about football when you're going to be talking about cooking? Okay? Strong introductions also use transitional words and signposting effectively, and we'll be going back over those two vocabulary words, transitional words and signposting. And here's the first one, signposting. Write that down. This is definitely a debate term. To signpost is to provide main points at the beginning of the speech. And you'll hear this a lot of times is a person will say, well, I'm glad I'm here to talk with you today. I'll be talking about this, this, and this. And then you can hear them go into their first point, and then you can hear them go into their second point, and then they close with their third point. Okay, and you'll be doing something similar. For the rest of the outline, I want you to think about, well, actually, this is still for the introduction outline. Think about fishing. So here's steps to ensure introduction success. First, you've got to lure them in, right? The attention grabber. The lure, when you fish, the lure is the colorful, like the little colorful thing they put on the hook to hide the hook, and it makes the fish want to bite. And sometimes they use worms. Sometimes they actually use big chunks of fish meat, especially when they're trying to catch predator fish, right? And so you have to lure them in. And so the listener hears that funny story, hears that interesting quote. The fish sees that shiny thing, and they want to bite. And then once they've bitten, once they're really listening and they're engaged, that's when you hook them, right? And so in the fishing, that's when the fish's mouth hopefully gets stuck on the hook, and hopefully your listeners are stuck on what you're saying because you tell them, why should they care? Why is it important? How does whatever you're saying relate to them? Okay, it can sound kind of sassy, like, why should I care? Why should I listen to you? But it's actually like a very legitimate question. People don't have to just sit and listen. They can tune you out. You know, they can even they can be staring at you politely and nodding and still tune you out. Okay? And so you've got to give them reasons for caring. You know, like, let's say that you're giving a speech at on one of the north, like, schools more on the north side. Like, let's say we're at Lopez giving a speech, and you know, there's all these Lopez students and moms and dads, and in the competition room. And let's say you draw a topic about trains. That's always very popular. Why should San Antonio invest in a rail system? And, you know, maybe you hook them by, you know, maybe you give some quote, the average San Antonio person, and it has to be factual, of course, but let's say it is. It feels factual that the average person trying to drive north on 281 and during rush hour will spend an additional hour and a half on the road waiting in traffic, right? And then if I was a north side parent and I was listening to that, and there I was sitting in Lopez Middle School, I would be like, oh, wow, did I really add an extra hour and a half of my life in the car? And then you say to me, why should I care? Well, I'm here to speak with you today because it's very important that we consider saving your time, audience. And if we had a rail system, an effective rail system, then perhaps your time could be saved because you would no longer be waiting in traffic, but you would be sitting comfortably in a Wi-Fi train car riding home, right? And then all of a sudden, I care. All of a sudden, if I'm, you know, living up North 281, and you're telling me that, and you're telling me that somehow I could reduce an hour and a half of traffic of my life every day, I would start listening to you. Okay, so you have to relate it to your audience. Now, normally your audience will be other middle school kids or a judge who is in high school. But this is a skill set that I want you to use for the rest of your life. So your audience will not always be middle school kids unless you choose to teach. Hey, okay? And so you always have to know your audience. Then you reel them in. You state the topic and the outline, and you signpost for the body of your speech. And then the fillet of fish, that's when you cook the fish and serve it. That's when you transition smoothly to the first point. Okay, and that is an introduction deconstructed. And now we go to the body of this speech. Now, I want to give you a moment. I'm actually going to pause the video, and I want to take you a moment to write down the three sentences that are the three parts that are underlined here. And I want you to read through these real quick, and I'm going to get back to you. Okay, so the best way to set out the body of your speech is by formulating. That means thinking, figuring out a series of points that you would like to raise. And so in Impromptu, we really like the 3-point system. If you have too many points, you're overloading. If you have too few, you haven't, you haven't achieved your time limit. And so 3 points is usually nice and happy. And so choose like the 3 major points that you've come up with, and then you go from there. Because then what you do, I want you to look at this first point. Then what you do is you give supporting details, reasoning, explanations, evidence for that point. So you kind of have to think of the point as an umbrella. And then you have to think about, or let's do this as a plate, right? And so you have 3 plates, but no one wants an empty plate for dinner, right? They want things on the plate. And so then you have to fill those plates with metaphorical food, and that's the supporting details, that's the explanations, that's the reasoning, that's the evidence. Okay, so those points alone are empty, and so you're responsible for filling them. Okay, and so take a moment, pause the video, and write down this outline, because it's going to become very important when you get to class, because we're going to use that. And then a conclusion. The conclusion, you refresh. What I mean by that is you say your points over again. So you'll say, and in conclusion, I believe that we should have trains to reduce traffic, to reduce, carbon dioxide emissions, and to increase sanity in San Antonio drivers. Okay, and then you say, thank you so much for listening. I hope you support the implementation of the rail system in San Antonio, and goodbye, or and thank you for listening. And then I think by goodbye, what I was trying to go for was you take a moment. You don't just like run and hide off, off of the front of the room. You just sort of stand there for sort of a brief pause and sort of let it sink in, and then you slowly go sit down. Okay, and that's it. That's really it. Impromptu speaking. You can do this. I promise you. And more than anything, it's simply a way for you to, I will say it again, effectively and efficiently organize your thoughts. And we're going to use this sort of organization technique in all the other debates we do. Okay, and so you'll see this formula. You'll see these kinds of concepts for public speaking. For all the other types of public speaking, you'll see this basic formula. And here it is. I can't wait for you to come to class and get started. I can't wait for all the cool, interesting speeches that I will get to listen to. And you will get to listen to. And you will get to give. Okay.